You want, if possible, and there is no matter, if possible, to abolish suffering. Pleasure as you understand it, that is no goal, that is to us our end. A state which soon renders man ludicrous and contemptible, which makes it desirable that he should perish. The discipline of suffering, of great suffering, do you not know that it is this discipline alone which has created every elevation of mankind hitherto? That tension of the soul in misfortune which cultivates strength, its terror at the sight of great destruction, its inventiveness and bravery in undergoing, enduring, interpreting, and whatever of depth, mystery, mask, spirit, cunning and greatness has been bestowed upon it, has it not been bestowed through suffering, through the discipline of great suffering? In man, creature and creator are united. In man there is matter, fragment, excess, clay, mud, madness, chaos. But in man there is also creator, sculptor, the hardness of the hammer, the divine spectator, and the seventh day. Do you understand this antithesis? That which is formed, broken, forged, torn, burned, annealed, refined, that which has to suffer and should suffer. There are higher problems than the problems of pain and pleasure, and every philosophy that treats only of them is a piece of naivety. This profound insight of Nietzsche is an accurate reflection on the nature and necessity of human suffering. Our minds are not built for a constant influx of ease, pleasure, and self-indulgence. Indeed, stress and difficulty are almost implicated in the function of happiness for the human being. According to Nietzsche, it is profound suffering that defines the most profound pleasure, that is, the elevation of one's spirit and being. Nietzsche explains that this necessary duality is present in the very nature of the human psyche, that man is both chaotic and ordered, and as such, chaos gives rise to a world of potential, but it is the hardness of the hammer that gives form to noble qualities typical of higher man. In other words, it is only because of uncertainty, danger, and unpredictability that we are able to create qualities within ourselves that elevate us to our highest state of being. Through willpower, chaos births virtue. While it may be true that anxiety, fear, sadness, and all other manner of psychological difficulty may accompany these elements of our lives, we should seek to embrace these emotions as signs that we are challenging ourselves and moving forward. To feel frustration and anger in any pursuit is the state of progress. Such thoughts and feelings should be regarded as necessary in the right amounts, so as to attain the balance that leads to the optimal growth of the human spirit. To abandon difficulty altogether would be a catastrophic mistake, and would ironically lead to a more miserable existence. Nietzsche further expands upon the significance of suffering in his writings, going so far as to say that truly profound suffering and hardship causes a qualitative change in the nature of an individual, even such that the depth to which one can suffer almost determines their innate rank against their fellow people. Having experienced such intense negative emotions, the spirit changes to such a degree that it cannot relate to those whom have not been initiated by similar suffering, and even avoids meaningful contact with such people altogether. In Nietzsche's words, "The spiritual haughtiness and disgust of every human being who has suffered deeply, how deeply human beings can suffer almost determines their order of rank, the harrowing certainty of which he is wholly permeated and coloured, that by virtue of suffering he knows more than even the cleverest and wisest can know, that he is familiar with, and was once at home, in many distant, terrible worlds, of which you know nothing." This spiritual, silent haughtiness of the sufferer, this pride of the elect of knowledge, of the initiated, of the almost sacrificed, finds all forms of disguise necessary to protect itself against contact with importunate and pitying hands, and in general against everything which is not its equal in suffering. Profound suffering ennobles, it separates. To the uninitiated in suffering, the idea that purposeful suffering is a necessary and good thing seems inane and illogical. However, once initiated by such suffering, one's perspective will change such that he will hardly recognize the person he was before. His weak mind will initially break down either partially or completely. And if he does not give in to immediate gratification, his mind will reconstitute as something sturdier, stronger, and of a greater, higher quality, a quality that need only be tested yet again to demonstrate its strength. After attaining a mind capable of withstanding suffering, as well as the inner sense of peace and pride that accompanies it, the initiated looks upon the soft and untested man with disdain, as he now speaks with a tongue only the strong can understand. He is able to see past immediate pleasure, as he has been taught that purposeful suffering gives quality to the human soul, and lasting emotional and psychological satisfaction. With this newfound perspective, the initiated will orient his life around true and effective pursuits to happiness, regardless of the short-term consequences. In applying this perspective to humanity, he will see that certain sacrifices and times of hardship are necessary to forge a great civilization. He will, in Nietzsche's words, have a conscience for the collective evolution of mankind. This higher perspective that lives outside of pain and pleasure is perhaps the most sorely lacking quality in today's population. We are no longer characterized as pioneers of foreign lands, victims to the whims of disease and nature, soldiers of war, or God's chosen people. We no longer have any inherent reason to purposeful suffering bestowed upon us by our ancestors. As such, we are confronted with the problem of having to find our own purpose, our own calling. However, the majority do not find nor even attempt to find such purpose. As a result, what characterizes the modern struggle is a chronic avoidance of pain and a habitual pursuit of shallow, numbing pleasure in every conceivable manner. In a word, escapism. Obviously, this mode of existence comes with a heavy cost, namely the erosion of our ability to endure necessary suffering. Due to his inward cowardice and fear of pain, the common man today behaves so as to mitigate as much emotional friction as possible. He shrinks back from any burden of responsibility and cannot conceive of voicing an original moral opinion outside of what is perpetuated in his current social circles, because in the eyes of this type of man, to create conflict is to sign his doom, for what may he defend himself with? Subconsciously aware of his lowly and weak state, yet never willing to confront it, he remains a devout zealot to a religion of cultural analgesics and opioids, and upon being challenged for his pathetic life, defends it with outrage appropriate to someone with such weak psychological foundations. As a result, the weak, emotionally frail man is among the greatest enemies of truth and philosophy. The capacity to willfully engage in hardship and difficulty can even affect the accuracy to which we understand reality itself. The process of learning is usually the process of letting go of former ideas for favor of new ones. However, when such ideas constitute part of the perceptual framework by which we understand the world, we tend to become attached to these ideas and form part of our identity around them. As such, when these core beliefs are threatened to be false, those without a constitution for suffering can easily become delusional in their flee from pain and refuse to think about the matter altogether. In Nietzsche's words, Something might be true, although at the same time harmful and dangerous to the highest degree. Indeed, it could pertain to the fundamental nature of existence that a complete knowledge of it would destroy one, so that the strength of a spirit could be measured by how much truth it could take. More clearly, to what degree it needed to be attenuated, veiled, sweetened, blunted, and falsified. Then, later on in the same book, Nietzsche addresses the will to ignorance. This same will is served by an apparently antithetical drive of the spirit, a sudden decision for ignorance, for arbitrary shutting out, a closing of the windows, an inner denial of this or that thing, a refusal to let it approach, a kind of defensive posture against that which can be known, a contentment with the dark, with the closed horizon, an acceptance and approval of ignorance, all this being necessary according to the degree of its power to appropriate, its digestive power, to speak in metaphor, and indeed the spirit is more like a stomach than anything else. Again, in the same book, Nietzsche continues to write, "It is more comfortable for our eye to react to a particular object by producing again an image it has often produced before, than by retaining what is new and different in an impression. The latter requires more strength, more morality. To hear something new is hard and painful for the ear. We hear the music of foreigners badly." As such, the coward and his weak stomach is often unreceptive to truth and remains in a childlike state of immaturity, unable to accept that his capacity to understand the world is limited and his understandings are probably false. He will refuse to confront the psychological chaos that comes with being wrong about some core value in life, and so maintains a state of willful blindness. However, the delusional man pays a bitter price. Subconsciously, he knows he is wrong and cannot escape this fact, despite his persistent refusal to confront the truth. As such, the psychological state of the coward becomes one of inner turmoil, unrest, and frustration. Until he amends his beliefs, his mind will remain in a state of conflict, likely giving birth to even further psychological illnesses. When our capacity to reason and maintain coherent logic is abandoned, we inevitably dissolve into a lower state of being, driven more by animalistic instinct than rational thought and reason. To summarize, therefore, an avoidance of suffering, in the psychological sense, can disintegrate the higher power of man and his divine capacity of rational thought, and leave only his cowardly instincts. In my opinion, a regression in the evolution of man. For what is the defining quality of man, if not for his capacity for moral and logical reason? To be a coward to truth is to attack one's very essence as a human being. In contrast, therefore, it can be said that to willfully confront necessary suffering is to protect the highest quality of man, his divine capacity for rational thought. In engaging with life in this brave manner, the higher man will be able to quickly correct his worldview with every newly learned truth. He will discern what should be integrated into his worldview, based not on merit of short-term discomfort and pain, but rather on the quality and accuracy of the idea itself. Over the years, his mind will become like steel. Every idea will be supported by an iron framework of understanding. Everything will make sense, and out of this higher perspective, man will clearly see his necessary path before him, and by virtue of his mental fortitude, he will walk it.